I self-identify as a global Black chick. And by that I mean, I claim 3 cities and 3 countries and 3 continents as home.
Hello and welcome to Stories from Africa and the African Diaspora. My name is Ivy Prosper, and today I'm really excited to talk to a woman who is doing something that is really needed in the Black community. When it comes to healing, we've all gone through issues, past and present, where it comes to bringing us together as a people. Whether you're in the continent of Africa, whether you're an African American, an African Canadian, Caribbean, maybe you're somewhere else in the diaspora, you could be an African descent living in Europe, Australia, South America. We are all over this world, and we all have issues because of what happened in history with the transatlantic slave trade, with colonialism, so many things that we're dealing with that we need to come together and heal from. So today I have a fabulous woman who can speak to this and what she's doing to make sure that we come together and heal as a people. Esther, I have been wanting to have a conversation with you for a long time, because you've been doing so many things here on the continent and beyond. You're such an accomplished woman. I want you to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, so that everybody knows why you're so important and significant, and why you're a woman that I see as a Renaissance African woman. You are,
I'll take that.
You've been doing so much for our community in so many ways, and then now you have this event that's coming up. But first, I want to dive into who you are and what you do. So introduce yourself, because I think you can do better justice than I would.
I self-identify as a global Black chick. And by that I mean, I claim 3 cities and 3 countries and 3 continents as home. Accra, which is where we are right now, Ghana, that's the country of my heritage, my spirit, my ancestry, my family. My mother's Ashanti, my dad's in Zuma. Accra is home.
I didn't know your dad was in Zuma. I had no idea.
My daddy's in Zuma, God rest his soul.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, my daddy's in Zuma.
I learned something new about you today.
Yes, and I was born in London, went to school there, and definitely am shaped by the Black British experience. So that is home, London is home. And then I lived in New York for almost a decade, and that really helped shape the emotional justice, racial healing framework that informs what's going to be happening at this event. But then I also worked, so that's who I am, global Black chick, of a daughter of this soil and a daughter of the diaspora.
Right.
I come to the work as a journalist and a storyteller. I'm a playwright, and so storytelling is, for me, I've modernized an ancestral tradition and looked at how can we engage it in this day and this time for us. So I'm a storyteller. And I'm a CEO. I'm the CEO of the Armah Institute of Emotional Justice, and that's an international institute, the home of this racial healing model, emotional justice. And we essentially devise racial healing resources, but we do them creatively. We do them with projects, with training, and with thought leadership. And this event coming up on Saturday is a flagship emotional justice experience that's specifically about Black on Black healing. And we've designated September as the month for Black on Black healing. The idea is to create a global initiative, a global focus, where Black people in Ghana, across the continent, in the States, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, in Brazil, all across Europe, we have a month that's a designated focus on what it means to do our work and to heal between us as a global Black people. And the aim is really simple, that it becomes as familiar to our calendar as International Women's History Month or Black History Month. So people will be doing events all over the world. But this event is the launch event, it's the flagship event that really sets the tone of what we are working to build and create. And emotional justice, which is the racial healing roadmap that I created, really also came out of global Black experiences in Accra, in Cape Town in South Africa, in Philadelphia, New York, in America, and in London. That's
now,
me.
When you talk about racial healing, what specifically are you referencing for someone who may not have an understanding of what you mean by racial healing? Because we always hear mostly about the African American experience.
Right.
And sometimes people feel like even though we're all Black, whether you're a Black person living in Ghana, in South Africa, in the Netherlands, but we have different experiences.
Absolutely.
So how does racial healing apply to us all?
Yeah, so that's such an important question. And part of the challenge we've had is that racial healing has really been so often about either the diaspora or it's between Black and white. And what emotional justice is saying is that for racial healing for us as global Black people, we have a legacy of untreated trauma.
Untreated trauma.
Untreated trauma from the systems that have shaped the countries that we are in. So we're in Ghana. We have a legacy of enslavement, of colonialism, and of military coups. So we need a national healing between us as Ghanaians of different generations. That's an intergenerational healing that's specific to us. And so when people hear in Ghana, people hear racial healing, they think, actually, I beg, which healing is that? For who? And part of what emotional justice does is get really specific about the Blackness in different locations and identify what is the work in that location. I was just a couple of months ago, I was in Cape Town, South Africa, and we were doing events across Cape Town at the Center for the Study of the Afterlife of Violence and the Reparative Quest in the University of Stellenbosch, at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, talking with the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation, talking specifically about Blackness within the South African context and how the Truth and Reconciliation Commission shaped a racial healing experience for Black people that really centered whiteness. It really centered white people.
Did it?
Yes, it was about soothing and affirming white anxiety, white fears, white emotionality. And what that means is that what we did not do and what did not happen is for there to be a specific focus to say to Black South African men, how did apartheid shape your masculinity? How did it show up and shape how you love in your community? How has it shaped who you became to yourself as a Black man in South Africa? Where your masculinity was required to be on the ground for you to live? What has it cost you to survive? And what does it continue to cost you because there's been no real focus on what happened to you? That's Black in South Africa. What about a Black man in America? What about a Black man in Brazil? What about a Black man in London? So we're very specific about identifying how we are all connected to a Blackness in Africa, but in Britain, in America, in the Caribbean, there are distinct Black experiences, and a Black on Black healing is about the entire panorama of our Blacknesses, saying we're bringing them together, but we're not collapsing them. We're being specific about those different experiences and saying we're so obsessed with what we perceive to be our personal trauma, we never connect it to the trauma of another Black person. So what that does is it blinds the possibility of the future that we need to build, and it gets us stuck in a cycle of repercussions and resentment.
It's interesting when you talked about the South African experience and having it been centered around the whiteness.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that I hear about in America too. Like I hear about in
Absolutely.
America, in Canada, in the UK, and they use the term was it white fragility? Would that be similar to what you're talking about? It's like people try to be sensitive to not offend the white person.
Right.
And it sacrifices and compromises what you're trying to do for the Black experience at the same time.
Right.
How do we move past that? Because even when I think about, because I was raised in Canada, born in Ghana, but raised in Canada.
Right.
And I think sometimes there are ways that we communicate as Black people where you're in certain spaces, you kind of hold yourself back because you're like, okay, I can't say this because I might offend these people here.
Right.
So then you don't get to really be your true authentic self because of that. So when we're operating in these kinds of spaces, how then do we try to reconcile challenges we have within our own communities?
Right.
When we're always worrying about those people who are not part of our trying to come together and heal. Like how do we Am I making sense?
Absolutely. And what you're saying is what we call in emotional justice, you're speaking the language of whiteness. We all do it. And when we say that, it's the non-judgmental, non-accusatory term. The idea that we've all been nurtured to center whiteness. When I say whiteness, I don't just mean white people. That whiteness, all the systems that shaped our modern world, taught us that we are not the center of our world, that your blackness should not be the center of anything. And that if it is, you're a problem. And so it teaches all of us to center everything but ourselves. And what this event is saying is that what does it mean when you center yourself and then you connect to somebody who is you or a shade of you? And how does that begin to change and shape how we see ourselves in each other, how we see each other, how we treat each other? How does that change how we might collaborate? How does it change how we might do business together? How does it change what it means to prioritize and center our own, what I call the emotional economy, our own identity, as opposed to what does it mean to make sure that we haven't offended A, B, C, D, E, F to Z person, that we're not doing that work. And so in Ghana, for example, when I talk about the emotional economy of blackness in Ghana, it looks very simple. When we have a healed community in Ghana, it means that when I go to Kempinski Hotel, everything in there that I eat is born of the soil of farmers in Ghana. It means that when you offer me chocolate, the only chocolate that is available to me is from the cocoa pods in the ground in Ghana. It means that when I ask for mango juice, you can tell me the name or the farm that you've got it from in Ghana that I am now drinking in this hotel. And the person drinking it may be black, white, brown, indigenous, but what they're consuming is born of this soil. Because what a black on black healing does is it's about unlearning the idea, the internalized idea that we are not good enough. And the way we are not good enough shows up in, we think something from outside is better. That's how it shows up in Ghana. If it is, you go to a pharmacy because you need medication. The first one they'll offer you is what they call I call it the elsewhere.
Yeah, the foreign ones.
The outside. Yeah. And then you'll say, hey, Charlie, it's expensive. Is there a homegrown one? There is a homegrown one. A homegrown one is cheaper. The idea that it's cheaper because it's homegrown, there's a value, a depreciation of value attached to that. So when we talk about we all have our emotional work to do, how have I, how have you, how has your audience, how have we all internalized our emotional relationship to blackness so that we don't center ourselves? And the reason we talk about emotional connection all the time is that's very different than your ideology or your philosophy. Because you can be Pan-Africanist all up and down, philosophically, quote everybody politically, you can be blackity, black, all the blacks. You can be doing all of that. But this is not about that. It's about your emotional relationship to blackness and how that has been shaped by identities outside of yourself, by the systems that have created where we are today. And so you're born in Ghana, you live in Canada. What you learned in Canada, how does that shape how you move through Canadian spaces and then how you move in Ghana spaces? And I'm not talking about the code switching that we've all learned to do
code switching
because of those spaces.
Normal,
It's very normal. I'm saying what happens between us as global Black people. So this event is really about saying, when we as global Black people are in the center, what is our emotional work to do? So how does our untreated trauma show up? That we've got to navigate and deal with all of the wounds, all of the trauma that we feel betrayed, resentful, angry, rage-filled, traumatized. We don't want to say certain things about how we were all taught that Africa, nobody wants to be African. Why would you want to be African? What you were taught, poverty-stricken, on your knees, begging, there's nothing there. Who aspires to be nothing? And yet, the landscape of Africa literally feeds the wealth of the entire world. France doesn't have an economy without Africa. They don't have an economy without Africa. And so, like Francophone Africans, 1 second, they don't have an economy without you. So then what does it mean if you have an intra-racial healing between you as Black people, recognizing that you've been shaped by the French, but like, hold up, wait a minute. We're taking everything back. And when you take everything back, it's not about negotiating who you're going to be to France. It's about negotiating who am I to myself and who am I to my black brother or my black sister, anywhere in the world they find themselves. So instead of, when we think about an airline, for example, in Ghana, you think about Ghanaian airlines, you think about, we're going to compete with, I don't know, British Airways, Delta, and fly to here. What would it mean if we said, no, we're going to have an airline that takes you straight to the Caribbean, any island you want, that you can move around the continent with ease and speed?
That's what we need.
Yeah, we have an economy. We are an economy of entrepreneurs, but we've built an economy for multinationals. That's what untreated trauma looks like. That you are not building for who you are. You're building for who whiteness taught you that you are not. And the difference in those two things is the future that we've got to build and the future that we want to, the past that we've got to let go of. But you don't get over a past, you've got to move through it. You've got to navigate what it did to you, how it shaped you. And people don't want to say that. You know, we roll fly. Come through with a swagger, with your beautiful dress and your fly earrings, gorgeous chocolate. People don't want to admit or say that. I have internalized the language of whiteness so that I believe when they validate me, I'm validated. It matters more to me that they validate me than that I validate myself. If we're in the States, African people have been taught, don't be around African Americans. We've been taught thugs, criminals, gangsters. They will be the reason for your demise. And that is a global narrative that is designed to stop Black people looking directly at the language of whiteness, looking directly at whiteness, looking directly at systemic oppression, looking directly at white supremacy, and saying, you are the common denominator, not us. You are the common denominator. What does it mean for us to turn to each other, look each other in the eyes, and say, what is our emotional work between us and within us? Because the individual work then connects to the institutions and the systems that we're part of. And emotional justice is unique as a racial healing roadmap, because that's what it's saying. Our individual work has to connect to the institutions that shape our environment. It's not the self-help industrial complex. I don't want you to feel better so that you feel better. The idea is, how does centering your global Blackness, your particular Blackness, how does that then connect to the Blackness of your brother and sister? How does it change how you do business, or even that you do business? We created emotional justice love languages because we said our healing between us, we are a people who've faced and experienced so much brutality. You know, the love language of whiteness is violence when it comes to Black bodies. And so as Black people, we have an intimate relationship with violence. And so often we turn it on each other. So what does it mean for me to come to you with grace? That I don't necessarily feel, that I don't necessarily fully understand, but what does it mean to practice a grace that I'm going to have to learn? That I'm going to give you a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth chance, because there's no way to build a future outside of building it together. We've learned, Black people have been taught to give all the grace to whiteness, and we do, and to never give each other second chances. Why? Because we've been taught that our Blackness is not worth a second look, and we don't want to admit that we believe it, but it manifests in how we treat each other.
Wow, you've said some really deep things that have me thinking too, like really, and why it's so important for people to make it to your event.
Yes.
How can people go? Like with tickets, like how can they get information on?
So what's exciting about our events is, like I said, I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
So we're not really the traditional, someone's going to talk, panels. No. We have the healing drums. We have dramatized monologue. We have emotional justice libation, which is a conversation in song between the ancestors and the diaspora. We have global Blackness in the building, Black from South Sudan and Ethiopia and America, from Ghana, from the Caribbean, all gathered in one space. We have a dramatized monologue from a daughter of this soil, Pearl Kokodaki, phenomenal. Alison Williams, who's doing our emotional libation, African American. Our mistress of ceremonies, Nyamal Tadil, South Sudanese, Ethiopian American. So you see, even as we construct the event, We're bringing all these different Blacknesses into one space. We have our dialogue that I will facilitate and a call and response between me and the audience, where we're talking about using our names as an entry point to understanding our Blackness. So it's not an event, it is an experience. So we're inviting you to come have this experience. Saturday, 23rd of September. It's called Healing, Harm, Healing History. That title is so important. You cannot heal a harm that you haven't named and you haven't identified and we do not understand. And we cannot heed a history that we don't know. But for us, healing harm, healing history is about an ongoing practice. It's not a one event and then we're done. No, it's the beginning of a series of work. This is a 5-year initiative, and then it will move beyond the 5 years. Each year we will do an event, but because September is designated as Black on Black Healing, we'll start to partner and reach out with different organizations to do an event each year. We're looking at governance and African leadership. We're doing one specifically with students. We're doing one specifically on global Black masculinity. We're doing one specifically looking at loss and grief through the lens of Black women, an intergenerational dialogue between Black women. So it's really intentional work. We're very excited about it. September the 23rd. People, it's in person. I know you keep talking to me about the streaming. Streaming is not happening.
Yeah.
It is really intentional that we want to come together and be in person and engage this particular experience. I beg or register. As for Ghanaian, people are there, you don't want to register. The event is free because we want to be able to come together and gather without thought of cost. It's free. You have to register. If you go to the Emotional Justice Instagram, you just click on the link, you register, right there.
Okay.
I don't register my people.
Yeah, we know in Ghana, people do things at the last minute.
Last
It'll be like 20 minutes to the event is about to start, and people will still be registering and hoping that they can get in at the last minute. So
and we know it's gonna be a
limited
lot of
space in the location as well, right? So
and the location is so important. The Library of Africa and the African Diaspora. So even the location is a bridge between us as global Black people.
Yeah.
So we invite you to come to meet us on the bridge, engage the experience so that we can walk away knowing that this is our emotional work to do. And then every time you meet somebody Black, what does it mean to engage a practice of revolutionary Black grace? Every time, every encounter. What does it mean to take that to your place of work, to introduce that to your place of work, to expand that into your religious community, to engage it in your schools, your places of learning, academia, pleasure, entertainment, beauty, all of the spaces. And so that connection, again, doing the individual work to connect to institutional systems, that this emotional economy of Blackness shapes our fiscal economies. And the future of us as a global Black people is interdependent, it's interconnected. And in order for us to thrive, our healing is crucial. So come, Saturday, September 23rd, as we say in Ghana, you are invited.
you are invited.
You are invited.
And for those who cannot come, those who may be watching online and they can't come, they can't be in Ghana, they can always purchase your book.
Yes.
So they can learn more.
Yes. So the book, which is called Emotional Justice, A Roadmap for Racial Healing. Very excited that it was a #1 new release on Amazon. 6 weeks straight in our category. Thank you very much. And so the book breaks down everything that I've said, but in much more detail. We'll be filming the event, and throughout the rest of September, you'll be able to watch all the different elements of it. Again, follow us on our socials, at Emotional Justice on Instagram in particular, but we'll be showing a lot of that. And Beyond the Return, we're very grateful for your support. It's also exciting to say that our partners, the Ghana Caribbean Association, the African American Association, Diaspora, the Ghana Tourism Authority, and Beyond the Return, all of the partners represent Ghana and the diaspora. The other part that's really important is some people think of the return and Beyond the Return, they've made it into a story about the diaspora. And what Emotional Justice is saying is that we're bringing it home. Home is where it starts. That's why the event is here. And it will be here every year for the 5 years that we do it.
You see, so you have to book a trip to Ghana.
This is the excuse.
Book a trip to Ghana in
You always wanted to
September.
come in September.
You don't always have to come in December. People think they always have to come in December.
And that's what we did.
Come in September.
Come in September. And also because September is Black on Black Healing Month.
Yes.
Think of it, there'll be all these other things that you'll be able to do as we build out this calendar of activity. And then we'll be connecting to the diaspora. So this first one is live and in person, but in the future, more will be live streamed so that we can have a broader experience and engagement. But as with this one, dear, the drum is the queen. So the drum speaks, and the drum said, it's here, it's home, it's on this soil, and it's in person.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for taking the time to go more in depth about this so people can understand what you're doing and what to expect at this event. And then if you can't come to the event, you can get her book.
Get the book, and then go on the socials, check out at Emotional Justice for all the video and all the ways to have an insight and a moment and access to the experience. Healing Harm, Healing History, Saturday, 23rd of September, LOTAD, Library of Africa and the African Diaspora, 4 p.m. sharp. Come have your libation, and then let's exchange.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.